My name is Thomas. I'm 45 years old, and I live in a house that does not feel like my own. I used to think time healed everything. I was wrong. Time just hides the bruises better. After 10 years clawing my way out of the ruins of my first marriage, custody battles, bankruptcy filings, drinking too much in hotel bathrooms while telling myself it was just one rough patch, I met Sandra. She was elegant in a way pain couldn't touch. Beautiful, articulate, calm. Her presence made you want to sit up straighter. She was the kind of woman who never raised her voice and never needed to. When she laughed, it didn't sound like noise. It sounded like permission. She had 2 kids from a previous marriage. Zach, 18, and Jenna, 16. I had Caleb, 12 years old, from the storm of my past. My only son. The one thing that still looked at me like I mattered. Sandra and I married 9 months after we met. Too fast, everyone said. Maybe they were right. But when you've been starving long enough, anything that looks like shelter feels like salvation. We moved into a house on the edge of Austin. Stone porch, wide backyard. A crooked mailbox the previous owner never fixed. We called it a fresh start, and I let myself believe it. I bought the beds, painted the walls, patched the fence myself. I brought my son into this new family like an offering and told myself, her kids will be my kids. I didn't whisper that promise. I said it out loud. The rejection came in layers. Never direct, never violent, just cold. It's strange how much a person can ignore when they want something to work. Zach would pretend not to hear me when I spoke. If I asked him to take out the trash, he'd lean against the fridge and say, I'll do it if Mom says so. Not if it made sense. Not if it needed to be done. Just if Sandra gave the order. Like I was a substitute teacher filling in until the real one returned. Jenna was quieter, but her contempt was precise. She'd sigh audibly when I walked into a room. Text under the table during dinner. If I said anything, please put your phone away, or let's try to eat together, she'd smirk and look to Sandra as if to say, does he actually think he's in charge? And Sandra, she'd just close her eyes. Say things like, they're teenagers, Tom. It's not personal. But it was personal. When someone deliberately avoids calling you dad, it's not an accident. It's a message. I paid the bills anyway. Zach needed tutoring? I paid. Jenna wanted to join an art program out of state? I wired the money. The fridge was stocked. The cars were maintained. The internet never went down. None of that made me part of their lives. They talked about their real dad like he was a mythic figure. The kind of man who shows up twice a year, tosses $100 bills into birthday cards, and vanishes before the cleanup. Sandra never criticized him. That silence was its own kind of loyalty. Once Caleb came to me after dinner. He was confused. Why does Zach ignore you? He asked. He lives here. I didn't know how to explain it to a 12-year-old, so I said the one thing I hoped was still true. Sometimes people just need time. He nodded, but I could see in his eyes he didn't believe it either. That night, I stayed up until 2 in the morning fixing the dishwasher. The part had arrived late, and I didn't want Sandra to wake up to a broken appliance. I scraped my knuckles open on the metal panel under the sink. I didn't even curse. I just kept working. 2 weeks later, Zach told his friends I was the guy who rents the spare room. I told myself it was just teenage sarcasm. I told myself a lot of things. And then came the dinner. The one that carved out the last piece of whatever hope I had left. It was a Wednesday. I remember because I'd taken half the day off work just to prep everything. Sandra had been talking about Zach's college applications nonstop. He'd finally gotten in UT Austin. First acceptance. It was a big deal. I wanted to make it feel like one. I made roast beef from scratch. Garlic mashed potatoes. Green beans sautéed in lemon. Even Caleb helped set the table. Jenna rolled her eyes but showed up. Zach walked in 10 minutes late with his earbuds still in. No one said a word. When we all sat down, I raised my glass. Nothing fancy, just water, but it felt like the right gesture. To Zach, I said, you worked hard. You earned this. We're proud of you. I looked around the table, expecting at least a nod. Caleb was smiling. Sandra was already reaching for her fork. Jenna was texting. Zach looked at me, took a sip and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "You're just Mom's husband. Don't act like you matter." He didn't flinch. He didn't laugh like it was a joke. He just stabbed a piece of beef and started chewing. Jenna giggled. Not a laugh, a giggle. Like she'd been waiting for the line all day. Like they'd rehearsed it. I looked at Sandra. She didn't say a word. Didn't raise an eyebrow. Just kept her eyes on the plate. Like if she didn't react, it wouldn't be real. Caleb turned to me, fork halfway to his mouth, his face frozen in shock. He looked like a kid watching someone get hit in a movie, waiting for the hero to hit back. But I didn't. I didn't speak. I didn't stand up dramatically or pound my fist on the table. I didn't say, "Don't you ever disrespect me like that again," because I knew it wouldn't matter. I stood, walked slowly, carefully, like the floor might give out, and I left the table. I didn't go outside, didn't grab a drink. I walked into my office and shut the door behind me. No lock, no slam, just the soft click of wood touching wood. I sat at my desk and stared at the wall. My hands were steady. My breath was shallow. But something in me, something old and buried, cracked wide open. Not anger, not sadness. Just a kind of hollow realization that nothing I did in that house would ever be enough. They didn't see me as family. They didn't even see me as a man. I was a background character in their lives. A wallet that breathed. A seat filler at dinner tables I paid for. And Sandra, she'd made her choice too. Not through malice. Through silence. The kind of silence that kills more than any scream ever could. That night, Caleb came in quietly. He didn't knock. Just stood in the doorway and looked at me. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. Because how do you explain to a child that love isn't always returned? That sometimes you give your best to people who only see what you're useful for? He didn't speak again. He just walked over and sat next to me. Neither of us said a word for a long time. The next morning, Zach acted like nothing happened. Jenna didn't even look up from her phone. Sandra kissed me on the cheek and said, "You okay?" I said I was fine. Because that's what men like me say, even when we're not. A month passed. 32 days to be exact. Every morning I woke before the sun. I cleaned the kitchen that Jenna left like a crime scene. I checked the thermostat that Zach fiddled with like he owned the air itself. I refilled the gas in Sandra's car. Did the grocery runs. Balanced the bank account. Not once did anyone ask how I was doing. Not once did anyone say thank you. Sandra still slept like nothing had cracked. She still hummed in the morning as she poured her coffee. Still scrolled her phone at night with her back turned to me in bed. When I brought up what Zach had said at dinner, she sighed. The kind of sigh that tells you she's more tired of you than the problem you're pointing to. "I talked to him," she said. That was all. No apology. No defense. Just an empty sentence, dropped like a napkin on the floor. Jenna started bringing friends over again. Loud, careless girls with chipped nails and hungry eyes. They'd blast music from her bedroom and mock my cooking from behind the walls. "He's trying too hard," one of them whispered once. I heard it from the hallway. Zach spent more time out of the house than in it. When he was home, he barely acknowledged me. He used my tools, borrowed my charger, left my office chair out of place. Like my space was just another thing he could take without asking. And Sandra kept acting like peace was more important than truth. "You're not their father," she said once. Flat, emotionless. When I asked why she never stepped in, I smiled. It was the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "You're right," I said. "But I am the one who pays the bills." That didn't go over well. She stared at me like I just kicked her dog. Like money should come with no conditions. Like sacrifice was only noble when it stayed invisible. That was when I started counting the days in my head. Not forward, backward. Like a fuse burning. Like something inevitable was inching closer. And then came Denver. Sandra got the invitation from an old friend. Something about a business conference. A tech startup looking for investors. An exciting opportunity. She said Eric, the founder, was an old classmate. That he'd personally asked her to attend. "We could go together," she said. "Make a weekend out of it." I said yes. Not because I cared about the pitch, but because I needed to see her outside of the routine, away from the kids, away from the silence that had become our marriage. The venue was slick. High-rise windows, velvet rope entrances, jazz in the background that made everything feel like a lie. I wore a blazer I hadn't used since my last job interview. Sandra looked like she was dressed for war. Sharp heels, sharper eyes. We walked in, and I watched her melt into the room like she belonged there. I hung back. She didn't notice. Eric found her fast. Tall, good-looking in that oily kind of way. Expensive watch. Smile like a predator. He shook my hand like it was a formality. Barely looked at me. "Ah, you must be Tom," he said. Then turned back to Sandra. Didn't wait for me to respond. They talked. He leaned close. She laughed in that low way I hadn't heard in months. I stood behind them like furniture. When the presentation started, they walked to the front. I stayed back. I watched from the shadows as he took the mic, his voice booming with false confidence. "Pulse Mind Solutions," he announced. "The future of integrated neural tech." Something in me flinched. The name sounded familiar. I pulled out my phone, quietly, and typed it in. I didn't have to dig far. The trademark was already registered. Not by him. I took a step back. The carpet under my feet felt thinner. I called Isaac, old friend, works patent law in D.C. Sharp, fast, ruthless. "Takes 5 minutes," he said. "I'll call you back." He called me back in 15. "You're not gonna believe this," Isaac said. "Pulse Mind Solutions is a protected trademark. Has been for 4 years. If this guy's presenting it publicly, he's screwed. Forwarding it to legal now." I nodded. Didn't smile. Didn't say thank you. I walked back into the conference room just as Eric was wrapping up, shaking hands, posing for photos. Then it happened. One of the investors pulled him aside, short guy, steel gray suit. He whispered something. Eric's face twitched. Another investor joined. Then another. Sandra stood to the side, eyes darting between them, and I leaned against the wall and watched it unfold like a slow car crash. Eric tried to recover, to pivot, but the questions came faster than his lies could keep up. "Are you aware the name Pulse Mind is already in use? Did you file with the USPTO? Do you have any intellectual property protections?" I could see it in his posture, the shift from arrogance to panic. Sandra's face drained of color. I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't interfere. I let it burn. The ride back to the hotel was silent. She didn't look at me. When we got to the room, she dropped her bag on the floor and turned on me. "You did this." I didn't answer. "You sabotaged him. You humiliated me." I sat on the edge of the bed and unbuttoned my shirt slowly. "He was a fraud," I said. "I just let the truth catch up." She stared at me like I'd murdered someone. "You ruined everything." "No," I said. "I just stopped protecting what was never real." Back home, the air was thick with something unspoken. Zach didn't smirk anymore. Jenna barely spoke. Sandra moved through the house like a stranger in her own skin. And Caleb, my boy, walked into my study one night. "Did you really do all that?" he asked. I nodded. He sat down beside me, quiet. "What would you do?" I asked him. "If someone humiliated you like that?" He didn't answer right away. Just sat there, eyes wide, thinking harder than most grown men ever do. When he finally looked at me, it wasn't with confusion. It was with respect. That was the moment I realized something had changed. Not in them, in me. I didn't raise my voice, didn't demand apologies, didn't scream for acknowledgement. I acted, and that action, silent, clean, devastating, did what all my patients had failed to do. It made them afraid of what I could become if I stopped holding back. Because a man who endures is dangerous, but a man who stops enduring, he's nuclear. The next morning, the silence in the house felt different. Not the kind you earn after a long day. Not comfort. Not rest. It was the kind of silence you find after a detonation. After smoke. After someone finally notices the foundation's missing and the roof is beginning to sag. Sandra didn't speak to me over breakfast. Not even her usual mechanical morning. She stirred her coffee until it went cold. She didn't take a sip. Her nails clicked rhythmically against the ceramic mug like a nervous tick. Zach came downstairs and walked right past me, didn't even glance in my direction. But the swagger was gone. Shoulders slumped. Eyes tired. He looked like a man who'd been told the future had a ceiling, and that ceiling had my fingerprints on it. Jenna watched him from the stairs. No makeup. Hair tied back. She looked smaller somehow, like something had shifted that even she didn't know how to process. Caleb stayed close to me. He didn't say it out loud, but I saw it. The change in how he stood beside me, like he'd found anchor in the wreckage. They didn't say thank you, but they didn't mock me either. It was the first time I felt like I wasn't invisible. Still, there were no apologies. Sandra sat me down that afternoon like it was a board meeting. She had her laptop open, tabs pulled up, figures highlighted. You sabotaged an investment. You know how this reflects on me? I vouched for him. I brought people into that room. I watched her lips move, watched the panic disguised as professionalism. She wasn't worried about the lie. She was worried about the loss. I leaned back and said nothing. You think this makes you look strong? She snapped. You embarrassed your wife in public. My wife? I said slowly. Let her husband be told he didn't matter and said nothing. She shut the laptop. Too hard. Plastic cracked. Then she left the room. She didn't come to bed that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan cutting circles through the dark, listening to the silence in the hallway. And for the first time since I'd moved into this house, I didn't feel guilty for not chasing her. She wasn't my partner anymore. She was just someone I lived with. And that truth, quiet and sharp, sat beside me like an old friend. 2 days later, I got a call from the legal team Isaac had looped in. Cease and desist letters were already sent. Eric's pitch had been flagged on multiple investor boards. An article had gone out on a startup watchdog site. The title was brutal: Pulse Mind Fraud? Founder accused of using registered trademark. Sandra read it on her phone at the dinner table. She didn't look up. She didn't touch her food. Zach watched her, then slowly turned his eyes toward me. He didn't say a word, but that look, that flash of fear or maybe recognition, it said everything. It was the moment he realized I wasn't powerless. A week later, Jenna's art camp coordinator called the house. They wanted to confirm the deposit for the upcoming session. Sandra handed me the phone without a word. I told the woman to cancel the registration. Said we had to reprioritize family finances. That we were reassessing commitments. Jenna was listening from the hallway. She didn't even pretend not to be. When I hung up, she stepped into the kitchen and said, barely above a whisper, "You could have told me." I looked at her. This girl who'd spent the last year rolling her eyes every time I walked into a room, and answered plainly, "I don't owe you warning. You made it clear I'm not part of your family." She turned away before I could see if she cried. But I heard the bedroom door close gently. No slam this time. Sandra tried to play mediator. She came to me that night, the smallest sliver of humility in her voice. "They're just kids," she said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. "They're not just anything. They're who you allowed them to become." She sat on the edge of the bed like a woman sitting in a courtroom, hands folded. "I know you're angry," she said, "but you don't have to punish them." "I'm not punishing them," I said. "I'm removing their safety net. There's a difference." Her voice cracked then. First time in a while I'd heard anything real in it. "They don't understand what they've done." I nodded slowly. "That's the problem. And the only way they'll understand is if they feel it." The next morning, I turned off Zach's gym membership. He came home that afternoon in a fury. "What the hell? My card didn't work." I shrugged. "Must have been a mistake." He stormed out of the room. But he didn't throw anything. He didn't call me names. Because he didn't know what I'd do next. I was no longer the man who bent. I was the man who watched from the corner until he was needed, and then acted with precision. 2 nights later, Caleb sat across from me during a quiet dinner. Just the two of us. "Are you okay?" he asked. I wanted to lie, tell him everything was fine. But I didn't want to teach him that silence was strength. I'm tired, I said. He nodded, didn't press. Then, after a moment, do you still love them? It was a brutal question. One only a child can ask without knowing how sharp it is. I thought about it. I thought about every Christmas I paid for, every birthday I organized, every gas tank I filled, every broken cabinet I fixed, every late night spent doing someone else's homework. Then I answered him. I don't know if love is the right word anymore. I think I loved the idea of them, of all of us. He looked down at his plate, then back up at me. I'm glad you're my dad. I didn't cry, but my hands shook when I reached for my glass, because that's all I had ever wanted. Someone to say it and mean it. Someone to see me. The next day, Sandra told me Eric was being sued. She tried to hide it in small talk, as if slipping it in would dull the blow. I still don't understand why you had to destroy him, she said. I didn't answer, because I wasn't going to explain myself anymore. This was the bill coming due. This was consequence. And deep down, I think she knew, if I hadn't pulled the trigger, someone else would have. He built his life on lies, just like she had. That weekend, Jenna asked if she could go to a friend's house. I told her no. She blinked. You're not even my. She didn't finish the sentence. She saw the look in my eye, and she turned around and went upstairs. It wasn't victory. It was acknowledgement. Small, bitter, real. By the end of the month, I'd drawn clear lines. No more hidden payments. No more quiet sacrifices. Sandra now managed the finances for Zach and Jenna. I handed her the passwords. I closed the accounts tied to my name. The only thing I paid for now was Caleb, my son. The only one who didn't ask me to disappear. And still, not a single sorry from anyone else. No apology. No letter. No dinner cooked in return. They simply adjusted. Or tried to. But the house was colder now. Not just in temperature, in tone. They walked softer. Talked less. Avoided direct confrontation. Because when a man stops giving, the silence he leaves behind is louder than any shout. And so, the weight began to shift. They leaned on Sandra more. She felt it. I could see it in the way she stayed up late with a calculator and a credit card bill. And when things broke around the house, they stayed broken longer. Because the handyman had gone quiet. Because the wallet had stepped back. Because the man they said didn't matter had finally agreed. The days turned into weeks. Then into something slower. Something heavier. I wouldn't call it peace. Peace is earned. This was just quiet. Sandra moved through the house like a ghost with unfinished business. Not angry. Not apologetic. Just exhausted. I watched her some mornings. Standing at the sink, staring out the window, coffee cooling untouched in her hands. Like she was finally starting to hear the echoes I'd been drowning in for years. She never said the word sorry. Not once. But her spine wasn't straight anymore. That was its own kind of confession. Zach avoided me completely now. If we crossed paths in the kitchen, he'd mutter something low. A hello, maybe, and then vanish. The college brochures stopped appearing on the table. The gym bag stayed packed in the corner. I think he knew what was coming next. Jenna stayed quiet too. No eye rolls. No snark. Just silence. Like she was afraid anything she said might cost her something she hadn't realized was already gone. And Caleb, he kept closer to me than ever. We built a bookshelf together one Saturday. Didn't talk much. Didn't need to. He measured. I drilled. When we were done, he smiled like it meant something. I like when it's just us, he said. I didn't answer. But I didn't need to. That same night, Sandra came into my office. She didn't knock. She never did. She stood in the doorway like someone visiting a church they didn't believe in anymore. I was thinking, she said. Maybe we should see someone. I looked up from my desk. Someone, a therapist, a counselor, a marriage person. I leaned back in my chair, watched the ceiling fan turn slow. You think someone can fix this? She hesitated. I think maybe I was unfair. About some things. The sentence dangled, half-born, terrified of naming itself. But it was too late. Not too late for therapy. Not too late for talking. Too late for respect. Because when someone lets you drown quietly for years, a life preserver tossed from the shore doesn't mean safety. It means shame. I shook my head. I think what we need can't be found in a stranger's office. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just nodded, lips pressed tight, and left the room. That was when I knew the marriage wasn't over. It had already been dead for months. We were just still living in its grave. A few days later, Zach came home late, past midnight, slammed the door harder than usual. I didn't get up, didn't ask where he'd been, but I heard him in the kitchen, the fridge opening, cabinets closing, then the microwave beeped, and then nothing. 10 minutes later, he knocked on my office door. I opened it expecting a fight, but he didn't look angry. He looked lost. "I didn't know," he said. "I didn't respond. I didn't know you helped her. With the house. With school. Everything." Still, I said nothing. He shifted in the doorway. "I thought you just lived here." That one landed. Because it was true. That's exactly how they treated me. Like a roommate with chores. "I paid for your tuition," I said finally. "Your car. Your food. Your dentist appointments. Your new tires. Your therapy bills." He looked down at his shoes. "I know." We stood in the silence. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" he asked. I almost laughed. "Because I thought it wasn't supposed to be transactional. I thought family meant doing things because they mattered, not because you'd be thanked." He nodded slowly, then turned and left. No apology, just truth. It was enough. The next morning, I saw him help Caleb with his backpack. First time. No one said anything about it. Jenna, meanwhile, folded laundry for the first time in 6 months. Left it in a neat pile outside my office. Later, I heard her crying in her room. I didn't go to her. Not out of spite, but because some lessons have to burn before they mean anything. That Sunday, I sat on the porch alone. It was raining. Not hard, just steady, soft. The kind of rain that makes you remember. Sandra joined me, didn't say anything at first, just sat beside me, sipping something warm. "You were right," she said eventually. "About all of it." I waited. I let them treat you like a stranger in your own home. I let myself believe that blood was the only thing that gave someone rights. The rain filled the silence that followed. "I don't think I knew how to be with someone who actually stayed," she whispered. There it was, the heart of it. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the woman I'd married, the one I'd believed in. She was still there, but she was buried beneath years of looking the other way. "I don't hate you," I said. She turned to me, eyes wet. "But I don't know how to trust you either." She nodded. "I understand." And she did. That night, we didn't sleep in the same bed. That week, I opened a separate account. One for Caleb and me. Just us. The house didn't explode. It didn't fall apart. It just shifted. They started cooking more. Shopping for their own things. Planning their own schedules. Zach took a part-time job. Jenna cut back on her art camp requests. Sandra started seeing a counselor alone. I didn't ask what she talked about. I didn't need to. Because here's the truth. When a man gives, the world says he's strong. When he stops giving, the world calls him cruel. But I had learned something that most men like me never get to say out loud. Love without respect is slavery. And I was done being owned. I stopped being the cushion for their falls. I stopped being the silent shoulder they punched and leaned on in the same breath. I stopped being the man who waited for thank yous that would never come. And something strange happened. They adjusted. Not because they wanted to, because they had to. And slowly, painfully, they learned that boundaries aren't punishment. They're the last kindness a man can offer before he disappears completely. People say stepfathers sign up for hardship. That we walk into broken houses and help rebuild what another man abandoned. Maybe that's true. But no man signs up to be disrespected in exchange for sacrifice. No man agrees to be erased while he pays the bills. You either treat him like part of the family, or you treat him like the help. But you don't get to do both. Caleb and I still live in that house. Sandra sleeps in the guest room now. She says it's temporary. I haven't corrected her. Zach graduates next year. Jenna talks about moving out. They nod when I speak now. They clean up after themselves. Respect, it turns out, can be taught. But only if you're willing to let everything else burn. And Caleb? He calls me Dad now. Without hesitation. Without prompting. Just Dad. It's the only word I ever really needed. So now I ask you, was I wrong? Was I wrong to draw the line? To finally say, enough, when no one else would? To stop bleeding for a family that never cared who was dying? Or was that the only way to show them what love actually costs? Tell me, would you have endured it? Or would you have walked away before they learned what nobody really means?